Okay, so hey, I have 3 minutes to talk about a project I spent 5 months working on. Let's do this. I decided to break this up into 3 parts for 3 minutes. Part one, I wanted to talk about the general process of making the game and some of the more interesting ideas that went into it. Part two, I want to talk about what I learned, and that will kind of tie into part three, which is about the concept of play and why it might be useful for anyone to just decide to make a video game. So yeah, it pretty much is grueling and tedious and physically crippling to make a video game, especially when if one thing goes wrong, you have to consider everything just to think about it. But if you're OCD enough to get a huge dopamine release by organizing otherwise chaotic elements of electricity into metaphysically succinct and perfect structures, then believe me, you will be glowing. My skin, frankly, is better than ever. But my personal goal with this game was to coerce rhetorically this kind of weird abstraction that is only used popularly in game making. It's called meaningful experience. Tactilely, I tried to obtain this by layering goals that build into larger goals. How it works in the game is I put in an item leveling system. Each item offers combat boosts, and if you collect 3 of the same item, it upgrades into a level 2 item. If you get 3 of a level 2 item, it upgrades into a level 3 item. The player can rest with a little kahuna, but the little kahuna is an organic creature, so he needs to eat, and so he'll eat your items on accident. Now, this would be an endless progressive feedback loop, but what changes that is another system that I added, which is I'm calling the primary progression system. It's on the nose, but it's where you have to make a key. And in order to do that, you have to find specific items that contribute to making the key. And once you've added an item to the key, it acts as a permanent step in progression. Basically, instead of the progression graph looking like this, it looks like this. But what makes me most curious and spurs the point of most intrigue for me in both playing and making games is that there is a fundamental disconnect between the experience of a game and the literal underlying systems driving that experience. It makes for illogical associations between the two, especially in the beginning where you're just starting to realize the seed of the emergence of gameplay. It's like creating written language. You start by fiddling in the dirt with symbols, and eventually you combine those symbols to make a word. And how exactly it happens that from two things there emerges this one single new thing, which can only exist by these two separate things being positioned in a particular way, is mysterious. Why is it there? Where did it come from? It seems like it shouldn't happen, but it just does somehow. And that's where making a game becomes very interesting, because that's the space which you're forced to dialogue with. And because the dialogue is between you and a computer, the dialogue quickly becomes irrationally too rational and makes the relationship between causal things seem even more distant and mysterious than usual. Part 3, quick wrap. And this is where you start to think about a game. And a game, as I've come to realize, is about fragmenting the world in ways that are interesting, in ways that are conducive to play in very tactile, literal terms, which is all good. But an issue that occurs, especially in mobile gaming, is there are these subversive microtransaction games which exploit people's psychological tendencies in order to habituate them into small payments for fake things in a fake world. And this is why I think everyone should at least try making a game to see how games are done. Because otherwise, if you don't demystify the origin of games, you miss the more interesting mystery, and you miss out on understanding the rhetorical and moral elements that define a good and authentic game. And I assure you, they're out there.